presente, aquí lo canta mi gente. Bomba, bomba, para siempre. Baila, baila y goza, mi bomba puertorriqueña. Bomba, bomba, para siempre.
All right. Good morning. Good morning. So we're about to get started. I know it's the week after spring break, so if you're on vacation, hopefully everybody's refreshed and back, and hopefully the weather will get better. It's been rainy. So, welcome back to our monthly Tech Topics. My name is George Linares. For those that don't know me, I'm CMS's Chief Technology Officer. And as I always say, for those that come here every month or are watching our videos, these sessions are for everyone to educate you on the things that we're doing, what CMS is doing. Hopefully, this gives you insight on a month-by-month basis. But also is for the federal staff, and that's the initial really driver behind these sessions. But it has expanded, and it's a welcome expansion to have our partners and contractors join us as well, so you can see what CMS is thinking in the direction that it's going. So today we have Master Data Management. That is one of our official shared services, and they're doing a lot of things. And I don't want to steal their thunder, so I'm going to let them speak when the time comes. And then our second topic is Gartner for Technical Professionals, which is another offering that we have. I know in the contractor community, getting Gartner subscriptions is much easier, but for us, we have to be more mindful, and this offering that we have is really something that is being shared across the agency, and I want to make sure that the people can benefit from it, and that's the goal here. It's always about communication, collaboration, and make sure that you know about the latest and greatest offerings that CMS has. So it feels like a Monday. I don't know why, but it does. It's a little mellow, just coming in. I don't know. But maybe it's because it's after spring break. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Paul Benning, and he's going to talk about Master Data Management.
Thank you. I have a group here that's going to be helping do a demonstration a little bit later on, but they don't know their second job is that I'm terrified to speak in front of people. So they're supposed to scoop me up and prop me back up and wake me back up if I faint. So, all right, let me make sure I've got the buttons working. All right. So I see a lot of shiny faces, or, well, it does seem like a Monday. It's kind of gray out there. So I can't pretend to know exactly why everybody's here, but I do know we're doing a tech topic, and I try to make sure everybody leaves here with something informative out of this, because that's really what thought the audience might be interested in. I can't pretend that everybody might know what master data management is, so I've got to cover some of that, but some people might know, and they might be looking for some specifics. So I'm really going to break up the presentation into a couple pieces, give some groundwork pieces, give some background information. I'm going to stop a couple of times because I want to make sure that if people have questions or need something clarified on what I've presented, I can try to do that for folks because I don't want to lose anybody. And at the end, before we do the demo, I'll of course try to cover what people might have questions about MDM that maybe weren't in the presentation. So I really do want people to try and get something out of this. I mean, you could be here because you had nothing on your calendar from 10 to noon. That's possible. And I still want you to be able to enjoy this. So that said, what we have is going to really present about 10 pages that describe MDM. And as George said, a part of that is I have to describe what shared services are here at CMS, because that's, from an OIT perspective, it tells you how to engage in us, and it's different than a single owner system. So I kind of have to get into that a little. It's some good background, and then talk some about actual master data management. After that, I'm going to talk some about some of the data domains, because really we're about master data management. So I'm going to talk some about what type of data we have, what plans are for some other data that we're trying to bring in, other types of things that we're open to expanding, but we just need to know if somebody needs us to try and master data in other realms. Then we'll have a little section on some future plans, and lastly we'll do a little demo that hits on some of the areas that I'm covering in the presentation. All right, so a shared service. What does that mean? A shared service means that we didn't have a single owner system. We didn't have this funded essentially by a single set of requirements that a business owner brought us who then they own what the system is. A shared service means that we are one of the shared services. My next slide will cover what other ones are available, but essentially there are areas that over the 4 years that we've existed so far, and we're in our 5th year, the standing up and the existence of MDM has been paid for by the areas that initially put into it. Now, that means that we have a lot of offerings people can tap into without having to expend a lot of development effort with us. What you really should be looking at a shared service for this group, I see a lot of red visitor badges, and I'm going to assume mostly that's contractors. I've also got CMS people who may be trying to put together RFPs or trying to tip off some new work. Really what you need to keep in mind is shared services are there. We're open for business. MDM is open for business. 4 years, right now we're doing some re-architectural work because we've already learned things in the 4 years. We're trying to do some things that are going to streamline us and make us even quicker to be able to meet people's needs. But what you really need to know is the standing up of MDM, the creation of master data management as a shared service has been paid for by the centers that have used it from the beginning. We're there. We've got some artifacts, some ways that you can integrate with us that we're going to talk about. And it's important for you to realize that from a shared service perspective, because a lot of people would say, well, can I integrate with some other stovepipe system? That's what a lot of people think of. But for a shared service, that's not really the way you need to think about it. You want to try and get on our radar and have us working with you as early as possible. Because a lot of people, whether you're a contractor or CMS, when you're thinking about a new system, and we've learned this over the 4 years we've been in existence. I don't need to name names of other legislation and systems and other things that have happened, but we'll have conversations early on, and then a lot of things go out for bid, and people think they should try and do the mastering of data themselves in what they're proposing or what CMS is hoping to get built. And you should really consider tapping into the enterprise shared service that we have. We are the enterprise master data management and ID resolution that would allow you to not have to build that yourself, because everybody has enough work to do already. So if you can tap into what we've done, you're going to gain a lot of efficiency. That's probably the longer version of what I have on the slide, but it also says that you don't need to go and learn your own mistakes as you go through too. You can realize the benefits of what we've already gone through, and you don't have to go through iterations of standing something up as your own stovepipe system. All right, here I've got a little slide that it's kind of one of our graphics we've been using for 4 years. There was another shared service. We've kind of moved away towards only listing the ones that are the current de facto shared services. We've got business rules engine service, enterprise identity management, EIDM, and enterprise portal. Of course, I'm standing here, so I get to make the big triangle be about MDM. But just wanted people to know that there are other shared services. They follow the same model I just talked about on the last slide. These are areas you can try to tap into for things like portal, enterprise identity management, and business rules. So what is it with MDM that you should be thinking about? What are the things you should leave this room thinking, well, MDM can do these things for me? If you just remember what's on the triangle, okay, I've at least gotten maybe half the people. If that's what you're going to remember, I'm good. Because what you need to know is that we're about the data consolidation, which means we're taking data from other systems of record within CMS, and as a shared service, we consolidate the data. Some people, that's all they need. Another thing we talk about is data matching and indexing. That's really the heart and soul of what master data management does, because what we're saying here is across a data domain, and by that I mean something like healthcare provider data or beneficiary data, we're able to say these records might exist, this data might exist in these other stovepipe systems. We bring it together, and if you can't match based upon somebody's, let's say, social security number or tax identifier number, either because by hook or crook, because somebody might be trying to hide that they are listed one way in one system and one way in another, or by simple lack of typing things in and fat fingering. Sometimes you can't make the assumption that you can just relationally match up the data. what MDM is and what its strength is taking all the demographic data that might represent an entity for a provider or beneficiary and matching it. So that second, the middle part of the triangle, really is about that. And people, hopefully that's getting their creative juices flowing, because you might think that, well, I'm just going to be able to go in and find the system I need to tap into. For beneficiary, I might just need to go in and look at something from CME for beneficiaries and go in by HICN or some variation of somebody's social security number, or the new identifiers that are being created as we remove the social security number from being so key to it. And you may think you're going to find everything about that beneficiary. All right, here's the curveball. Beneficiary, let's add the term eligible in there. So yes, I'm talking about Medicaid beneficiary or eligibles. They don't use the same identifier. So where are you at now? You need to be able to do this identity matching. That's the same thing. We have a very deep bench when it comes to understanding provider data. And so the example I gave, I think a lot of people are familiar with how beneficiaries work, even if you haven't worked on that within CMS. Provider is a very complex area. Those who have worked in there, you can probably understand that that's just as complex. It takes a lot more words for me to give a simple example of that type of matching, but it's the same type of thing. You might have other national provider identifiers or EINs, TINs, where you think you're going to find that provider, and you're not really finding all occurrences of it. So that's what the purpose of the middle part of the triangle is that matching. So data consolidation, some people, that's all they need. That might be that you say you found everybody with a certain HICN. The data matching and indexing, it's so important. And that leads to the last part that's down there. We're not creating, let me just get this out of the way up front. You don't see the word golden record on there. We're not creating or stating that we've created the data quality, but what we've done, because that early on we thought that might be something we tackle, but it just isn't the way it works here. CMS's business owners really guard and own their data to a degree. So data quality is something where we're a platform. If you can imagine the first two things I talked about, only by doing that data matching can you find where there might be discrepancies. So we're a platform for data quality to improve, but we just couldn't bite off that piece of it. We couldn't make it be about us cleaning up the data, because the systems of records still own that data. But what we do is we have a lot of ways we can do reporting. We had a lot of ways we were early on with things like open payments, Sunshine Act, and things with Marketplace. We were working with them to show them some things that they were seeing that were coming across in the data. Now, a lot of these things have their own timeframes and trajectories to get built, so sometimes they can't bite that piece off either. But we're able to show uniquely cases, not just corner cases, but actual cases where things like double dipping would have potentially been occurring and things like that. So we're a platform that can allow for improving the data quality. And some of it's simple things too, like reference data and items like that. But think about those things as you're building any system. Hopefully you'll go, this guy Paul was standing up saying that we could do this stuff. Tap into it. We can do that. I'll get on a little bit later about how you can integrate with us and use these things. But we already do the ID resolution and we do the data consolidation. We're looking for people to tell us how they might want to leverage us as a platform to see some of the data quality pieces. An important part of this is the demo we'll be showing. I want people to think about that you're really going to be seeing some things, data uniquely, that you just can't see unless you do that ID resolution, and think about how that could help you, contractor or CMS, improve the data quality of either a system you're already working on or something you might be trying to build. Because when it comes down to it, people might put out a proposal, people might think they're going to be able to tackle that in the work they do. But we all, at the end of the day, we all have so much work to get done with creating functional systems. Sometimes these areas are like, if you could tap into it, I think it becomes really valuable. I'm not really that far behind schedule because the first 10 slides cover a lot of the basics, and then after that we fly through some data products. I'm not going to get into it, even though this is a tech topics, I'm not going to get into all the technical details of the data domains, but the first 10 slides are really important for people to get. So, all right, I talked about some of these pieces, but now master data management, it's important for me to say you might have picked up on this, we can't try to master everything about claims and transactional type data, right? So what do I mean by what type of data is that we're talking about? We're talking about reference data about providers, beneficiaries, programs, organizations, APMs, models, things like that. So we are open to and have always looked at how do we expand it, because there's value in saying how do we include the state data. I mean, we've been working with TMSIS on, as they've been evolving and maturing, how will we be able to bring in that data? And so that's a piece of the plan that we have. I can't say that we have all that in yet because, well, those who have worked with TMSIS know that it's still working. But we have been working with them on the planning, and we've done pilot work, and like with other projects, we've done some early ID resolution pieces to show where our value can be there. So we don't include transactional data. And another thing I have to say here, not on the slide, but we're not somebody's operational system. In other words, we're not building in somebody's business rules. What we are is trying to transparently show you all that system of record data that might exist. It's kind of a loaded statement because that makes it complex sometimes to work with the data, because we're giving you transparency to show you we're not changing the data that we get from someone like Pecos that has the provider enrollment chain of ownership, but what we're doing is trying to get that information and let you reach back to it and see what Pecos might have, and comparing that against other systems like NPICS, NPES, keys, other provider data, and other areas that might be coming in the future. This part I have a note that says I'm supposed to pause. I actually drew like a pause button. But I think I've tried to drill into your mind that the ID resolution piece is very important. But the reason I wanted to pause here was I really want people to think about how many times they might think they've been able to find any provider or beneficiary data that they needed. But now as you start thinking about, maybe I should have been trying to find the other outlier records. I shouldn't have just trusted that the one system really didn't have all the information I needed. I think those who have been around CMS long enough have probably had that experience in the past, and you've struggled forward and you've made the systems work. But sometimes just think back on it and remember there might have been times when if you could have found another source of data, combined it with it, you could have really built a more robust system, or you could have had a better answer, you could have had a better solution. I think a lot of times we all have to keep marching forward in what we're building, but given what you've seen so far about the types of data we have, the types of consolidation, the ID matching, and the potential for improving data quality, I just wanted to pause here and have people think about that, because I think everybody in this room has probably had really collectively a lot of experiences in building the systems here at CMS. So, all right, I'll hit the play button again. All right, this has a lot more words that are around some of the same things I said, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. This is a good slide for you. You've got it as reference when you need to talk to us, but a lot of it is saying the same things. System of reference, I'm throwing that term out there though. So we're not a system of record. We're taking the data, and that's why it's important that we don't change the data that we bring in from these other systems. We are matching against other, and we're trying to transparently present it back to people. I'm going to get into the fact that we use a term that we conform the data. So those who might not have heard of it, there is an enterprise logical data model. We try to adhere to that. There are some data products where our business owners wanted us to use their nomenclature for data elements and data structures and things like that. But for the most part, we're a system of reference. One thing we think we're doing as value add is we are conforming things to this enterprise logical data model, so that you don't have to understand 4 different provider systems data models. Instead, you should understand what CMS's ELDM, enterprise logical data model, would have. So we're presenting the same information. It just might have a slightly different label if it comes from 4 different systems, because each system labels things a little different. I think everybody's realized. That's part of what the system of reference refers to. The other areas I believe I've covered. Part of it is talking about the fact that you can access the data in web services, extracts, and BI reporting, and we'll go into that a lot more in the next slides. All right, how does this apply to me? And maybe it doesn't, because like I said, some of you might be here because you had nothing to do between 10 and noon. So, but maybe it'll make you think about something that could apply to you. So anybody who uses these data domains, there's a potential that we could be helping you. Maybe you're happy with just getting the one set of data you get from the one system that you hook up to as a data feed. But think about it. I mean, there are ways it could apply to you, because you might need to improve what that quality of data is, and you don't know what you don't know. You don't know if there's if somebody's address is listed somewhere, listed as a different address on another system. That could be really valuable to you. I think a lot of times people stop asking the question because they think, well, I can't get access to that, so I just have to march forward and keep building my system or keep my solution the way it is. But we have beneficiary data, providers, individual organizations, so there's some crossing of the data between those, but essentially individuals are a bit separated from the way that the organization providers are listed, and there's ways too that you could try to look at data across them. Most of that actually has to do with the way that providers would enroll for CMS. We also have programs in organizations. Those are somewhat referring to things like what is now APMs, but had been demos, models, accountable care organizations, things like that. Also, in the future, we're looking to, we've worked some pilots, and we are looking at, as I said, Medicaid data. We're ready to go on that. It's just a matter of whether the data is ready to go on that. So we're anxious to work on that. I know that there are systems being built around that itself, but I think as that matures and as the enterprise needs the access to the data, we're targeting being ready to ingest some of that data, combine it, and I think there's a lot of value there. And another thing is we're always open to integrating third-party data. Really, what I'm talking about there is specifically some things around provider data. And we've seen things with like APS, and in other areas where we were like wowed by the amount of value that you can get out of using some of the third-party data. And another thing that's impressive is a lot of times we can't push back on data quality for CMS's systems of record. But I was amazed to find out that when APS has third-party data, they have a requirement that the other people correct their data. I was like, whoa, wait, you can do that? So some of the third-party data, it's amazing that there's a recognition there that by doing some matching, they can get value out of hearing, hey, my data, my commercially available data, third-party data possibly, could be improved by integrating into the system. So we're willing to try and work with those systems too and bring them in. That would really be somewhat a use case being brought to us by maybe somebody in this audience or somebody in the future saying that that's the type of data they need integrated with us. But we're in the enterprise data group, so we're always open to trying to do that and expand to do that. All right, here's a cartoon. I can explain it a little bit. But essentially, we have this big funnel. Everything goes in and it magically comes out there. Questions? No. So I explained it somewhat, but essentially for any one of the data domains that's listed on the left side, provider, Benny, organization, program, MDM essentially takes complex algorithms. It's not just saying, ooh, let's match this up, and it's some fixed relational matching. It's not that. It's probabilistic matching, like on steroids. And there's a lot of work that goes into making sure that we have the data owners, data subject matter experts involved in what this matching is. Because sometimes, I mean, demographic data, as an example, is a part of it. If somebody has an address, we need to know all those different address fields that are coming at us, which ones are of the value that say this identifies really who the person is. Billing, place of service, things like this. So we take that, and that all is used for doing what the matching is. So the big middle cylinder isn't the biggest part of the diagram because we're MDM. It's because that's what we're talking about, all that matching work going on and the indexing being created. And when we do the matching, it's iterative because we may realize by looking at what that match comes back at, wow, something matched that shouldn't have. We tune it on the side where we try not to have that happen. We don't really have the false matches. We tend more towards not getting that listed as a match rather than having false positives. But we constantly tune the algorithms. We go through multiple iterations. We work with the subject matter experts in the data so that you as a consumer, if you're not the expert in the data, we know that you need to be able to trust that what you're seeing matched up. You have to be able to trust that there was a lot of thought that went into that. So that's what goes on. There's a lot of other miskey distance and a lot of other technical pieces that go into how that match occurs so that we can still match up if somebody is like John and Jonathan and a lot of other pieces. That's a strength of having a tool that can do that for you and then tuning that to go across the data that we have. And some of those, even like name matches, it's set up geographically because there are areas where certain names would be more prevalent than others, and so you need to know that you should certain miskey distances and other names would actually be the same person. If it sounds complex, it's because it is, but it works. So one other piece, I guess, I'm just showing that the enterprise IDs come across as showing that the data matched, but an important part to say is we don't just generate some new ID that says that all of these providers or beneficiaries are the same person. We have a profile of data that, depending on which data domain, like for provider, it's a complex area where users were trying to use a lot of different provider data systems. So we carry a good amount of profile data. Profile meaning it's a profile of what provider is. There's a lot of addresses, a lot of other things I said, reassignments of benefits. There's a lot of information that goes into that. So it's not just these EIDs that come out. We actually have data stores that you can access. And we always keep track of where our source data came from and time stamping it so you know what that record was, when it was, and we keep the full history of that. So those are, since this is a tech topic, I figure people are interested in the technical part of it too. All right, this is a graphic that choosing one data domain, choosing provider profiles. I'm really trying to tell you, what if you could call one shared service? You don't have to build your own system. Maybe you're building your own system and you need this type of answer. You need this type of question answer. You need to know, what if I could obtain all this information that's in the pie about a provider from a single call to a trusted authoritative data source or repository? That's us, that's MDM. So you'd be able to get the contact information, enrollment data, credentials, licensures, certification, program participation, group claim, relationship, taxonomy, specialties, identifiers, demographics, descriptive characteristics. And if you need to, we have the systems that gave us that source data. We've got their identifiers, and you can, if you need to, you can be going back and talking to those systems too. You can link up with those systems. So it's a way to be able to disseminate this data across the agency. So it's not that it's just we either have the data you need or you're out of luck. It's that we have all this. Hopefully we can answer everything with that one call. But if there's something else, we can either build bringing the other data in, or you may say, well, I just need this. I need to know that I should go to NPICS, NPES, PACOS, keys. In the future, maybe you're going CME and TMSIS. You can get that and know what those identifiers are to get back to those systems too. All right, this shows you who we've supported, and when I say that there are areas that basically supported the bringing up, the standing up, and basically shared the cost of creating what MDM is, you basically have a list here of the areas that built what MDM is currently, and the fact that we're in a re-architecture state so that we can more quickly support these areas plus anybody else who comes to us and says, you have a data product, you have data, you have a service call that I want to try and tap into. These are areas that are currently using us. Really, the way that I like to read this is starting from the bottom, because what you really want to know is, well, what are some of these sources of data that we have that you may be able to read some business owner and say, well, I think I want to do the same thing as them, but most people would probably say, do they have the data already that I need? And we're able to ingest other data sources as we move forward, but this is what we currently have. So we have some of the payment models, beneficiary and provider alignment data for what is now APMs, but it had been models, demos. CME data for beneficiary, PAYCOS, NPICs, and keys data for providers. We've done proofs of concept to show that we could have worked with, and still would be able to work with things like consumer data. I'm talking about when Marketplace was stood up. We looked at things to be able to help things like open payments. We're working with QPP, which would be some of the macro work. So these are all important pieces. Some of those other systems then can flow data back to us too, but this is kind of showing you a pretty current picture of where we're at. All right, this is a tech topic, so now people want to know, great, he's talked about a bunch of data, and unless I live in his data world, how do I use any of that? All right, fair question. So how would you actually be able to use some things with MDM? Currently, we have data extracts, there's BI connectivity, and there are data services. Some being used in production. We've got flexibility to either expound upon those data services. That's a great thing. They're modular. You can kind of tweak them, create a new one, or just add some new data to it. So for data extracts, that's usually somebody who's trying to maybe take data themselves and either use it as a big file, or sometimes they're trying to store it themselves somewhere else. So we've got a PAYCOS unified global extract. We have some of the APMs, but it's essentially the provider or the program organization relationship extracts, which shows those APMs, providers and beneficiaries, and how they've aligned with these different models. We've actually been providing to Department of Defense a provider data response. They didn't want a web service. They wanted to send us a file, and we ship them back a file. We basically get a Finder file, and they say, tell me about this provider, and we send them back a file that has that information. It's a type of integration we offer. We also have the PMI, SPP extract, or image copy. There's going to be a lot more information on that, but essentially it's some provider data that consolidates provider information from multiple different sources and presents it in a way that we think and that users have found would be very useful instead of trying to navigate a lot of the other systems individually. Obviously, BI connectivity, what we have currently is MicroStrategy. What we have for our demo is actually going to be a local host running a MicroStrategy instance to show a provider data product. And then data services that are listed here, you've got them in your handouts to look at some of the specifics about what those data services are. All right, and before I take the first pause for any questions, I just want to talk about the fact that we are open for business and we're helping new customers too. So as we've been getting things stood up and we've stabilized in some of the operations, just within the past year or two, we've taken on some additional work with things with Department of Defense, is one of the ones I mentioned. CPI brought us them as a customer because we were going to be able to satisfy something that CPI would have been trying to build. So this is a great use of trying to tap into a shared service. It really, if you can imagine it, they were trying to satisfy something for DoD. DoD was like, build us this, or try to get us this provider response, and they said, oh, MDM already has that data. What can we do with that? So we were able to satisfy that need. For Macra, we're actually providing data that lets them verify providers for the quality payment program. That's into what they're using with their operational systems. For this year, they actually took a one-time feed. It looks like there's potential that they could be doing daily or taking more frequent information, or we're satisfying the need of being able to verify some of the provider data. And then healthcare fraud prevention partnership. it's interesting because they immediately, oh, my screen went blank, but that's still working. Okay. Healthcare fraud prevention is an area where they came to us and they immediately said, we want to talk to you because you do ID resolution. I was like, wow, okay, the message must be getting out, because for somebody to realize that it's essentially an area where they looked at it and said, we're looking to try and complete this proposal of work that we're doing, and we know that it's a big heavy lift for us to do this. We're already going to be busy enough trying to, my screen is blinking all over. They already knew that they were going to be busy enough trying to build everything else that they had proposed trying to build. So if they could just take and use what was already provider identity resolved data, they knew this is great. There's already enough work to go on with the other things we're doing. If we can just take this data, they're looking at using that data, and I think came right to the table knowing that that was the value that they were going to get out of it. And the important part is they were all able to utilize this as a shared service that had basically already been created, and they didn't have to create a new stovepipe, which CMS is always happy with, yay, because then we don't have to be basically building other things where we're making the same mistakes over and over again. And we make sure that, as you know, it's taken 4 years and we've learned as we've gone, but we've learned and we've improved as we've learned those things, and that's built into the product that you get if you tap into using MDM as a shared service. Otherwise, we've seen it time and time again, when people are trying to build something their own, they make a lot of the same mistakes. So here I will stop and ask. I know there are people dialed in. I'm going to probably hold questions for those that might be dialed in until the end. But here, is there anything in the room that you didn't understand about what I presented? I know at the end we can do questions about MDM, but is there anything that you don't understand about what was presented? Because those were the major points for MDM. Perfect. Everybody's asleep. Oh, or there's a question. All right.
In your re-architecture of MDM, does that mean you're going to be moving the infrastructure to the IDR, so IDR integration?
The question is, in the re-architecture of MDM, are we moving to IDR as the infrastructure, for those on the phone? The answer to that is no. The IDR, I'm trying to think, how many slides back did I have? Because we do work with IDR, that's in our same group, and we've been working with them on how we can use disseminating data across a wider area, and also making sure that when any of the data that we have available, they're able to use the indexing across what other data they have. IDR also has very much claims type data, so as people are looking for the transactional pieces, it's really more to do with how could somebody tap into getting that next level of data. Does that answer your question? It's definitely not, it's not something that's being subsumed into what IDR is, though I think might have been your question. Yes? Question is, how often is MDM updated? Well, what we've done is it's an answer that's different for each of the data sources. And it's not, we measured what it takes to be as up to date and as frequently updating as possible against the accuracy, guaranteeing the accuracy, and some of the source systems like Keys, to be honest with you, very early on said, yeah, things don't change a lot. So if you take it monthly, but then for others we're doing daily, and we're structured in a way where if the need were to be more transactional, more real time, in certain places, we've structured our system so that we could do that. We could pick up things like replication and be able to do things like that to bring the data in. It's not a straight answer, but that's the best I can give. So I mean, and we could work with anybody and give you what the frequency is of the ones that we do have when we do the updates. So, sure. A lot of times people's questions are really about a data product and what the frequency of that is, which is also a little different because us ingesting it is one thing, and part of our re-architecture is we're finally getting to the place where we are separating our operational data store of ingesting the data from the from where we're serving the data up to consumers. Another question. All right.
So in the big three that you do around the data access, data quality, do you do any data validation, or do you assume that the data you get is accurate, or do you compare it, say, on the identity side with like a third party like Experian?
So the question is about whether we do data validation. There are some rudimentary data validation checks we have to do to be able to load data to some degree. But for the most part, we load the data that the people have as long as it's structured. It meets the structural requirements. So like your question is, an example would be something like an address where we could do finalist validations. Finalist is a product most people have worked with. It's been around CMS forever. We would, if we did something like that, we would store that data separately and say, well, from finalists, we got a verified address. We would still have the source system data. Because really what we're doing is we're trying to be an authoritative system of reference. And because we couldn't bite off that piece that had to do with changing it or with doing the data quality improvements, we instead are having to kind of keep the data, keep track of who it came from, when it came from them, and be able to show that something might mismatch. Or because your criteria for what the verification is might be different than somebody else's. We very early on came to the realization the term golden record is really a misnomer because golden is in the eye of the beholder. Everybody had a different definition of what they thought trumped something else. And there are systems that do that. They have kind of these rules for pick a winner type things. But we couldn't do that because we couldn't get one answer from business to say, well, ours is, like provider, people might not realize this, but we search around. There isn't really one person that owns all of provider. There's a lot of different areas, and PAYCOS would be the system of record for enrollment for Medicare providers. It's very specific. But when you're combining this data across other things, somebody else has a different answer about what is the pick a winner logic. So that's what it is, and so that's why I say that we're a platform where you could try to make your own decisions. So all we thought we could do was we could carry the water to the point where people could look at it and have it as a platform to say, make their judgment about what the golden record is, and we can try to give them the data for that. Does that help answer it? Okay. All right. Yep. I'm moving along. I'm telling you, it's 26 slides, but the rest of them I can go quick. All right. In fact, the next two are, that was a duplicate. See, I already got through one extra slide. This is basically giving some information about what the provider master index, shared provider profile is. If everybody understood, as they seem to say they did, all the other material I've covered, I'm not going to go through and just read what these slides are, but you have this as reference. Part of what we're going to be doing in the demonstration is showing you what an early view of a pseudo version of the provider at your desktop would be. But all these things here would make sense given the other information that is in the slides. So for provider data domain, we do have PAYCOS, NPICs, NPES, and keys, and ID resolution and the other things that I've mentioned so far. I do need to expand a little bit about what PMI and SPP have. You see this mostly as, once again, take it home, it's reference. But what you see here is the fact that this is comprehensive when we talk about what the PMI tables are. I'll repeat that. This is comprehensive as far as what PMI tables we have. Anybody who's worked with the provider data would realize, well, that's going to be a heck of a lot easier than trying to navigate through hundreds of tables just to get these couple pieces of information that are listed here. So your take home for this is listing for you the types of easy way that you can get those relationships, and we've done the ID resolution across those 4 different systems of provider data. For SPP tables, we had to give a little bit more of that profile data I was talking about before. People really had a need to be able to see the data easily, so SPP is that. It is for the PAYCOS data. We've included additional data elements as a way to be able to disseminate that data across the agency. But if somebody needs ID resolution, you'd really be looking at those, the PMI tables. For the provider data products, this is basically listing the top 3 are ones that are currently in production. The bottom 3 are ones that are in works. Obviously, anybody who says that they have a need for something, we can add those things to the list. But now that you understand the types of data that we have on the back end, really these are an extension of saying how do we build access to that type of data. So we have a data extract for PAYCOS UGE. Anybody who's tried to work with the PAYCOS GEF file or with some of the other extracts, there's a lot of, not learning curve, but it does take some effort to try and understand it. And what we're doing is we're by using the conformed ELDM model for for the data products, as other models change on some of the source systems, you don't have to change your system to keep ingesting what this new data is, because we're adding a layer of insulation from you being impacted by upstream systems, data structure changes, and things like that. Here we've got a list that's a little bit more of a breakout of showing who's using the provider data. I think a lot of people in the room, it was important for me to put this in here because you might work with some of these areas, and this way it'll give you a kind of a piece of reference for whether there's somebody you can talk to or whether you might be doing something similar to what one of these areas is already doing. All right, it's going to take a couple seconds to talk about these, the next two products, because I mentioned provider in a box and provider at your desktop. So provider in a box would be saying that if you're trying to stand up your own data store of provider data, this is what we're talking about with provider in a box. So we're talking about it's a turnkey way of being able to say, how can I take the data that's in this PMI and SPP and be able to drop it onto what you would have to have as your own data store. But a lot of people, when you're trying to build your systems or you're doing your proposals or you're trying to put out, CMS is thinking about what type of work they're going to do, if you know that you're going to need to store this data yourself and manipulate it as your own operational data store, provider in a box is what we've seen people needed to be able to just get a package that says, this is a way that I can just do that and I can get that integrated data and stand up my own data store. So the question is, if someone is to stand up or wants to stand up their own data store, how would you deal with the question of currency? Now, are you talking with the system that's trying to stand it up, or are you talking about the fact, because Pecos is one of the ones that's a daily for us, so that, I don't know if that answers what you're talking about from, right. Right. Oh, well, that's actually where we have daily updates. It's a matter of whether you would either ETL or however you want to try and adjust what that daily piece is. And some people go, well, okay, we can't take daily, and daily doesn't matter, but weekly you can get the full, and we don't want to build like a Delta process or something, so they could just take what is because the weekly, I'm kind of looking back for Jill and Helm, but I think the weekly, in the cases for most of these things we're saying would be full replace. Could be full replace if that's the way you decide to take it in. PMI is weekly, yeah. And the UGE is daily. Thanks. This is talking somewhat about, when I talk about re-architecture, 2.0 is the piece that by the September, October, November timeframe we're shooting for those. So we're saying FY18. But you can see some of the key features. Just to differentiate provider at your desktop is basically saying that if I just need to be able to query against something, but I'm not going to stand up my own data store. So currency, that is exactly the type of question where somebody might say, I just need to be able to query against this set of data. I have a transactional type of a question to ask. And that's where a provider at your desktop would be helpful. That's going to be a quick demo. Trust me, it's quick. This is basically stating that for APMs or for demos and models, accountable care organizations, SPPs, we have received and we continue to store the alignment data. So if it says that a provider or a beneficiary is aligned with one of these models, we continue to store that data, and we provide, to support them operationally, we provide overlap reports, because sort of like the data quality thing, we don't make a decision about whether somebody should be allowed to enroll in one of the models. What we do is we store it, and we're more of the platform for them to discern that somebody might overlap, and then they apply their own business rules on that. So we've been in that business since actually before we stood up the first version of MDM. We were storing that data and serving that back up. This is listing those models and whether they're current or whether they're ones that have actually completed their work. Kind of seems to jump 2 slides. All right. Quickly letting you know that not only are we saying that we're re-architecting the actual technical system, but we're embracing Agile in a way that we now, instead of doing quarterly releases, we are doing, we actually have sprint teams. We have 4 different sprint teams, and they are working across doing releases on an ad hoc basis. And because we're not always deploying out at the end of each sprint, but we are doing 2 to 3 week sprints. Worst case, depending on how many points we're trying to cover in that sprint, it could be a 4-week. But we're doing the work this way because we know that people wanted to be able to get changes in quicker, and we want to be able to facilitate meeting what CMS's needs have been and the customer's needs have been. It's not just about sprints and Agile, though. It's also about the fact that we're modifying how we have services and APIs that you could use for microtransactions and being able to leverage using the web services calls for MDM. These are just some of the forward pieces that I've already talked about, dealing with. We've been working with TMSys, looking at ways that we can apply identity resolution to the data as the data matures and comes in as TMSys deems that it's ready for us to be able to use. Taking an active role with Pecos and other systems, creating ID resolution as a service. So the idea there would be simply, you may have your own data about a provider that you want to know, would this resolve to something else that's in the system? So ID resolution as a service is referring to that. You may need to say, and you may only be maybe what if analysis or test case type things where you're like, would this provider match against something that's already in the system? So that's what ID resolution as a service would be. And we're looking to leverage some of the infrastructure pieces being in the cloud. This is actually talking somewhat about the fact that we've tried working with some of the specific business owners on doing some of the users groups. It seems to always be delayed, and it's not really something that we seem to get off the ground. But so instead, just for an MDM purpose, we want to be able to have a users group to support the data products that we currently have. So that's something we couldn't do an overall, every owner of provider getting together for a user group. We wanted to participate in that. But instead, we're standing up a data users group to be able to provide a monthly forum to support the data products we currently have. Contact information is going to be at the end of the slide, so you can obviously reach out to us if you want to be involved in that when we get to it. All right, and here we have points of contact. It looks like Helen just left because she knew her name was about to come up. Myself and George Benares is the division director. Just pointing out, the system is stood up. It's running. You can tap into existing data products that we currently have. If you need something new built, it's like a lot of other things, or if you need us to operationally support you, then you would have to talk with us about how we could support you moving forward. With that, I'm going to switch it over very quickly. There's a way that there's a lot of value in you being able to see some of this data, as I talked about, where providers have the data consolidated, the ID resolved, and an important part is there's a team of people. It's more than just these two. I mean, they're good and all, but there's more people actually that took a lot of depth of understanding of provider data. So when you have questions about it, that's actually what we're realizing. A lot of people, that's a lot of their project plan has been trying to get an understanding of the types of provider data that's out there. So I hand it over to Jay and Luis.
All right, thanks, Paul. Okay, so my name is Luis Lee, and this is Jay Gopalan. He's the developer here. I'm just kind of communicating what he's developed. This is just, I will emphasize a taste of MDM for provider data. And we wanted to find a way to get the average user closer to MDM data, but this is still in very alpha stage, I would say. But we wanted to at least to support and to help Paul's presentation here, just to kind of help the folks over here visualize the provider data. So. This is in the MicroStrategy platform, and the reason why we chose MicroStrategy because it was low overhead for us. It was already there. We're not experts in MicroStrategy, so but we were able to kind of use it and mock up some data. And I would like to emphasize here, this is a sampling of the data. The tax identifying numbers are not real. So keep that in mind. So we're all safe here. So in here now. It is representing the integration. Let me stand up here. It is representing the integration of a provider data, and for an average user to kind of think about, I just need to look up a provider and try to see how all the data intersect against that provider. Now, there's a whole lot of information we captured, but part of the challenge here was to try to find the sweet spots for one particular provider and understand how to kind of give you the best sort of view, comprehensive view within a page. But it's not like we're limiting in here. We could actually extend to additional information once you click into that provider. But in here, its purpose is to just kind of capture the essence of what MDM is trying to do within this format. So some of you may have already started reading across the column here. You see that you can do an MPI search and a TIN search on the left side, and you have additional search criterias. And with that, and Jay kind of showed, he has an MPI picked out here. But before we go to search, you see how all the sort of represent from a provider-centric point of view, whether or not the provider has multiple state licenses, multiple other identifiers that kind of represent a provider, such as PTANs, UPIs, or others. If this provider is currently sanctioned, and I kind of, because we don't have time, I won't explain the MPI TINs anymore, but we also have the reassignment of benefits count in here, just so that you understand from a, let's take a look at the top line, Thomas Bowles. You have an understanding that Thomas Bowles is reassigned to 47 different organizations. So you have that kind of information all captured here, and finally you have the state where this physician may be practicing multiple states, but right now, because this is sample data, we're just showing Maine and this provider's primary specialty. So, now you did the search here, MPI, and if you click on that, yep. So once you find your provider, you have the ability, and this is, I want to try to emphasize the data more, the data underneath, to try to visualize what Paul was saying. But you see what MDM is doing. For this provider, you have multiple versions of the addresses. And notice how the addresses have sort of different contexts, different ways that it's being entered. And that's part of the engine that kind of runs underneath MDM to link all of those data sets into that provider. I kind of capture it underneath one index, I should say. So you could kind of see when you look at the addresses, you can see that it's not really representing, like it's not trying to master the address. I should just clarify here. It's over here is giving you all the points of addresses that we get from different sources. Okay. Now, as you, just to kind of see master data in action, you can actually, where can you go? Here. Yeah, we can go down. There's associated tax identifiers, and which this particular physician it has its social security number, but it also have other EINs that is engaged in primarily usually group practices. So you can see, I think the key part here, takeaway here, not to get into the nuances of the data, you can see that we're getting this information from multiple sources. Right now it's showing MPICs and PACOs. Okay.
Yeah, Louise is pointing out, this is when I talk about data consolidation and the fact that you've done the ID resolution. The reason why we wanted to bring that screen up is that you see there's multiple source systems that we're getting this from, and you could even see that PACOS is the only one who has those dates entered for what is the validation for that tax identifier.
And MDM really brings a lot of value, especially over time. Providers move, provider have new locations, provider even may, for very rare circumstances get a new NPI. So you have these things that are pretty much can't really, we have all these cross-linking happening so that if you're trying to reference data across different sources, you can find it through MDM. So this is just, I think this kind of captured the essence of this page here. I'm not going to scroll through it here. This is a demo. One thing I should say is, even though this started sort of a kind of trying to make it more accessible to the customers, I think we've had good discussions internally in which we'll probably have this a productionized version of this interface probably sometime later this year. So we have plans. So if you, I don't know if you are interested in getting into MDM, but please keep in mind around maybe October, reach out to us if you want access to this interface. Okay. I have a question there.
Yeah, I noticed that in your roadmap you identified adding RESTful API to your app. I'm assuming you're going to expose services. Are you going to expose the same sort of services that would allow other applications to develop interfaces similar to this? So, for example, get provider by ID, that sort of stuff?
Yes. We've been talking a lot about that. I think underneath it, in fact, the version that, this is not using the services, but we've been talking deeply about making this, even this interface, use the services, the RESTful services.
So you swap out the underlying,
right,
whatever you're using, to those same services that you would expose to other applications.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, we're talking about logistic and how, but yes. Yes. So we go back to provider search for a second. So again, this is just a real taste just of what MDM, the data that MDM provides. And when you see the EID there, that's the internal MDM, how it indexed that provider. And you can do searches by TIN and all that kind of stuff. In this interface, we wanted to also provide the user a method of, we know that they may not have one-off searches, but they may not have like a contractor that would be able to ingest PMI, SPP data and all that stuff. So we also provided bulk search capabilities so that literally if you have a spreadsheet of MPIs, you can probably copy and paste to multiple searches of providers. So I'm assuming, and I guess I'm volunteering, when we go live, we'll probably have a template to help users do bulk searches for MPIs. That's that, and I think we're kind of short on time. There's other things. I mean, I'm really just, I'm saying the third time here, but just a taste on the MDM. And when we're playing around with visualization, because you could imagine a provider has all these associations from an individual org level and hierarchies and that kind of stuff. Now, this is nothing fancy in here, but we're exploring visualization tools that MicroStrategy offers and other tools outside MicroStrategy to help the user kind of navigate, especially I think one good use case is fraud. Really just navigate through these providers and how they're linked to each other to find maybe anomalies or just find, understand how the provider is engaged with other providers. So any questions? I'm just going to stop right here. Okay.
All right, I think we're good.
All right.
Thank you.
So no question?
got-
Oh, there's a couple there.
Just one quick one. So given your position as a system of reference, you get to see all the other systems and the data that it's in. Is there any opportunity to drive standardization back up to those systems so that not only your job is easy, but that there's a system where operating across those other systems?
That's a pretty big question. I think for those on the phone, I think the question is there a way that we could drive standardization for the types of data quality or standardization back up to the source systems? We're open to being the platform for the people to use, but it's one of these, we know how much we could bite off. We couldn't change what the data is, and I think that's why you're crafting the question that way. We're open to trying to giving any reports that people want and giving the data back to the people. In some cases, you had asked the earlier question about whether we edit data. When we do see some of the errors, we do have the channels open where we say, look, your data doesn't even conform to your own standards for what you say it would take for keying. So we get that, and people are appreciative of that. But sometimes the answer is, yeah, we know, thanks. I mean, so we're able to see it, and anybody who's looking at the data this way can see that maybe there's some source of data. I'm not going to say the quality isn't there, but it is what it is, and then you have to make the determination whether that is. A lot of times it's letting you see things in a new light. So maybe if you just went directly to a system, you'd be filtered out from seeing what some of the other data is, and you could do that also. You could choose which of this data from that source you're going to pick, but we're not in the business of forcing the people. It's one thing, that's why I was like, my jaw dropped when I heard that from like APS for third-party data. They said, a part of you working with us is when we tell you something's wrong, you go back and correct it. I mean, because commercially they know that that's going to make them be more successful too. But within CMS, the business owners are very tight on ownership of their data. And so they're the ones who own whether they're going to go back and correct something, because it gets back to the golden record, and whether they deem that something is wrong or right isn't quite as simple as wrong or right sometimes to them. They know that. So we do have standardization, and some of the things are even standardization of things like trying to apply to the enterprise logical data model. We try to help people with structure of data as far as standardization. But I think you might have been talking more about the actual data itself. Yeah. So hopefully that answers it. Sure. Anything else? I don't know if there was time for anything.
Well, I want to thank the team, Paul, Luis, thank you. So just to add some color here, so actually that question is related. So MDM is one of the shared services, and there is an effort underway today, and there will be a presentation in a future tech topic about the shared services transformation. This being one of them, that question about standardization has come up. So there's probably a pilot that's going to be underway internally, and we'll share the output of that on coming up with some standardized data architecture, especially with technology being able, it has offered us more possibilities, especially being in the cloud, but other products as well. As we're separating compute power from storage is big. We see a lot of potential and be able to leverage and minimize the number of copies and how many times we copy the data, because it was all tied together in the past. So there is some thinking around that in terms of having that technology in that availability. How do we move forward, having the IDR, have the MSys as it exists today at AWS and other repositories like Hadoop? How do we bring that together? And how do we create an advisory team for market data architects really to provide that guidance to the teams? Because you don't know everything there is out there, and we know that. So we're trying to create that service. So we give you insight in, obviously if you want MDM, that would be one of the resources that will be available, but there is more out there. So we're trying to sort of harness that together. So that's one of the things that you'll see, I'm hoping towards the end of this year, calendar year, and we can showcase on what we're thinking about as a service to give you more or better guidance about the data that we have and how can you integrate it in a way that could be sort of leveraged for other efforts. So we're really thinking a lot about that. So I know it's a little abstract, but trust me. And then the transformation efforts, that's the one that we're trying to, we know that the landscape of the agency is changing in terms of how users view technology, how you, our partners, bring technology to CMS. So we're trying to sort of capture those trends and then take action on that. One use case that I can bring up and share with you guys, and will be a presentation here too, is Salesforce. It's one of the CRMs that gets used a lot. So now we've integrated, we're working on integrating Salesforce. Yes, it's still a SaaS offering, but there are some elements that are going to be integrated with the enterprise from an identity perspective, from the log perspective, and we're trying to create a pattern to sort of use for any other SaaS type products that get brought into CMS by you, by the business, and trying to make it available and enable its usage. That's how we're evolving. We're trying to create resources to enable the enterprise to execute the business. MDM is a good example. You know, there's always a question about the provider and the logic and the data. It's not that easy. And teams sometimes go on their own and they find it and they come back and they say, wow, it was much more complicated. How come I can't find this? Well, then the team already has the logic embedded in the service. And so that's one of our goals, is making it so compelling that you come and use it, but at the same time give you some level of autonomy instead of creating that dependency, which we had in the past with some of the services that we have. So we're learning and we're trying to get better. The other thing I wanted to bring up, this information, and hopefully you've gotten, if you're follow, well, at least I know we sent it via email in terms of Zone. So Zone is a collaboration platform that we have. It was created actually by the marketplace in a way to communicate and collaborate with our partners. So Zone is going to be used for us, and there's a community out there called Technical Insights, where we're going to share all of this information. So if you don't have all you need is an EIDM ID, and we'll send a one-pager instructions how to get an identity, and then you can access that. That will be a way for us to communicate with you in order to get all this information that we produce internally. Okay, that was one of the things that I've been sort of talking about for a while, and finally we've been able to get there. So anyway, our next topic is Gartner, and I know most of you know about it, but I mean, again, this is not just for our partners, but also for our federal staff. I want to make sure that they leverage what we have today. So Mark, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Moores, and I'm responsible for our relationship with CMS. That's with a caveat that, for those you may not be aware, Gartner recently finalized the acquisition of Corporate Executive Board. And what I'll be talking about today will be maybe Gartner Classic, for lack of a better term. And I'll be focusing on one product in particular, which is called Gartner for Technical Professionals. Just as a quick primer for what Gartner is, we have 1,200 analysts that write roughly 7,000 pieces of research per year, and it's focused on 7 different areas, 7 different roles within IT specifically, and I'll touch on that more in the following slides. If anyone has any questions at any time, feel free to stop me if you want to keep this interactive, that's fine. Aim this the right way. Are they? Okay. Thank you. All right, so we call this slide the Gartner Pyramid. And as I mentioned, I'll focus at the base of the pyramid, some call it technical professionals. Actually, speaking of acquisitions, Gartner bought a company called the Burton Group back in 2009 and renamed their IT1 product Gartner for Technical Professionals. But we also have licenses that address all up and down the management chain, if you will. At the very top are Gartner for Executive Programs, and then for those that report to the C-suite, our senior IT leaders, we have 2 offerings. One is called Enterprise for IT Leaders. The other one is Gartner for IT Leaders. And there's an extended model called the IT Leaders Workgroup. Technical Professionals is more of an enterprise model, and that's where I'll spend the rest of my time talking about. Given the fact that there's good industry representation, I'll try and make my comments germane to both the audiences here. Learning. So just a quick overview of the differences. A lot of people know Gartner through our Magic Quadrant, right? And I think it's probably I just looked in March of 2017, it was the 3rd most searched topic within our portal, the first being blockchain and the second being Internet of Things. So obviously that's very popular, and that's what got Gartner started back in 1979. And really what IT Leaders is focused on are what are the things you should be doing. So if you're doing any sort of market research and looking at vendor capabilities, or in the case of what we call the hype cycle, which is to the left of the Magic Quadrant, that's looking at the maturity and adoption of technologies. So a lot of times, and CMS included, we'll reach out and ask, well, we've heard about a particular technology. How are people using this? Is it popular? Where does it fit in the maturity? And that's where the hype cycle we'll go ahead and look at that. And then with the Magic Quadrant, our clients have the ability to customize based on their parameters and can actually reconfigure what a Magic Quadrant looks like based on what's important to them. It might be something on cost or ability to execute in a particular area. And then with Gartner for Technical Professionals, one of the reasons why Gartner bought Burton Group was to focus more on an area less maybe about strategy and less about theory and more on execution. So Technical Professionals is focused on, all right, you've decided on what you want to do. How do you go ahead and execute that? And so there are different types of research methodologies that our GTP analysts write to, and those would be the decision points on the left, and to the right, evaluation criteria would be another such example. Evaluation criteria would be somewhat similar to a Magic Quadrant, where they'll look at some vendors and make recommendations. But this is really more a deep dive in the technology and looking about how you go ahead and implement an identity and access management system, and less about which one you should choose. So some of the questions, and of course this is by no means an exhaustive list, but just to give you an example or a flavor for what are some of the questions that you might ask one of our analysts in the technical professionals realm. And I think some of these here obviously are applicable to what is important, not just to our clients overall, but here particularly at CMS, things like DevOps and cloud and being scalable and resilient. And then as I mentioned, since we do have different research methodologies, those are highlighted in the blue font, and we have the different phases of a project. So the idea being, depending on what phase of the project you are in, if you're looking for guidance, these would be the different research methodologies that you'd want to consider, whether you're in the plan, assess, design, or select phase. And you can see here. So really, GTP is it's not an either or. What we recommend, if at all possible, is for folks to have access to both services because they do complement one another. Certainly at the executive suite, they may not want to get into the deep dive as far as technology is concerned. We appreciate that. But there are some areas that GTP covers, particularly identity and access management. Cloud would be another area, and security, where we have some outstanding GTP analysts to cover these topics. And speaking of those topics, we have here the 9 domains that GTP covers, and this is by no means an exhaustive list. So for example, I had a client that had reached out about doing a post-project survey, and they had access to Gartner for Technical Professionals. I was pretty confident that we didn't have anyone that could actually go ahead and answer that, but it turns out we did, and we were able to review the post-project survey for the customer outreach branch and provide some great insight and some research. So just suffice to say that this is not by any means an exhaustive list. But if you were to group this in the 4 overarching areas of what GTP covers, it would be applications, infrastructure and operations, security and risk management, and data management. And I would say cloud would be woven throughout that. And we have some outstanding research on cloud and a lot on cloud ROI and cloud costs. So we also have direct feeds from each one of the major cloud providers. So we'll know if there's an outage from, let's say, Amazon Web Services or Google. That information comes to us. It's not scrubbed by them. So we know when there's an outage and can report on that and publish that in our research. Speaking of the analysts, I mentioned that we have 1,200 analysts. In the IT leaders side of the house, there's probably of those 1,200, there's probably around 750. As it says here, we have 90 analysts under the GTP offering, and that number grows every year. I would expect by the end of 2017, we'll be up to well over 100 analysts as we continue to add to the ranks. Some of these analysts, actually, Kirk Nornschild has spoken, I believe, twice at a CEF meeting. He covers areas like, is Java dead? That's one of his areas of focus. But the idea of these analysts is that you have the ability not just to read the research, but to speak to them or to have them review documents on your behalf to understand if maybe recommendations you're getting from another source are valid and what Gartner thinks. We pride ourselves in being the world's largest IT advisory company, completely independent. We're the only company of its kind that has its own office of an ombudsman. So we take very seriously our independence from many vendors. So the other areas that they focus on is the ability to look at best practices. So talking to an analyst early on within the project life cycle to understand what the right path is versus maybe going down the wrong path and then trying to course correct. Always great to start with that conversation first and to learn from maybe the mistakes or the successes of others. Certainly not going to go through each one of these, but here's a list of some of the recent GTP documents that were published in March of 2017, and certainly some of the things in here of interest or what we're seeing as far as hot topics. So all of our analysts, as they're talking to our clients and understanding what's important to them, will go ahead and make pitches to their management about what research they think is trending and what they want to write to. And so that goes through a committee process, but you'll see here every month, so we're probably looking at roughly 15 plus documents that our analysts are writing just in GTP alone, not to mention the thousands of other documents that we're looking at, and in some cases refreshing a good portion of those. The GTP documents themselves can range anywhere from roughly 25 to 50 pages. So as I mentioned, these are pretty in-depth research notes with a lot of great information and insight, a lot of artifacts, things that you can pull off. Some of these might also be complemented by a PowerPoint presentation that you can download and incorporate. So the idea of this is that it's a time savings for you. You don't have to reinvent the wheel or hire someone to go ahead and pull together this information. The idea is it would save you time. Also, just wanted to include here, as George mentioned, the GTP license is sponsored by Office of Information Technology, and work with George closely. And there are 40 seats. So I mentioned it's an enterprise license, a little bit different from corporate executive board, I understand, but there are 40 seats, 40 named users that have access to the GTP research and the ability to speak to the analysts. And they're spread across the different centers within CMS. So right now, all the licenses are assigned, but I would say that if there's interest in what GTP has to offer, speak with me, speak with George, and we can see as maybe a license opens up, or if someone's not using it, to maybe make a change. Quick overview on what the usage policy is. As I just mentioned, we want people to take the information that we're providing and use it, leverage it. The way it works is when you have access to a research document, you can pull a graphic, whether Magic Quadrant, hype cycle overview, paragraph of information, insert it. We just ask that you go ahead and attribute it to Gartner. Analyst inquiries are limited to our named seat holders, and the reason for that is we do have 1,200 analysts, but we have tens of thousands of clients, and we want to make sure that for those that have access to the service that it doesn't take a long time to be able to speak to an analyst. In some cases, we set the expectation might be a 2 to 3 week lead time, depending on the topic and the analyst that you want to talk about. But the GTP analyst inquiries, because the in-depth information it provides are up to 60 minutes long, and these are unlimited. Any seat holder can be on as many calls as they want with an analyst. IT leaders is 30 minutes, given that it's a little bit higher level of information. And as part of either type of analyst inquiry, our analysts will review up to 20 pages of documentation. So whether that would be a contract, whether it would be a presentation you're getting ready to give to management, or an RFP that you're putting on the street, you'd want Gartner to take a look at first. We'll review it at 20 pages per analyst call. And just as I get to the end of the presentation here, just the reason for Gartner for Technical Professionals, why an organization want to have it, and the areas here. I think the last one is probably the most important these days, given the current hiring freeze. I think the value proposition of Gartner is only enhanced by the fact that it's the need to develop the current staff that is here and get access to, and I would say within industry as well, IT resources are scarce. There's a lot of competition in this area. When you do find someone that may not have all the skills that you need, Gartner can be a great complement to help people sharpen their saw and learn from what our analysts are seeing out in the industry by being able to talk to them and understand what's working and what's not. The idea also, as I mentioned, being able to pull this information without having to reinvent the wheel helps to accelerate project timelines and get to consensus faster maybe than you would if you're debating it internally. And obviously, by understanding what's working and what's not working, you can mitigate some of the risks and pitfalls that you might find if you maybe 6 months down the road realize you should have zigged when you zagged. So Why Gartner for CMS? And I would say that obviously this is germane to industry as well. 4 different reasons why to make the investment, and that would be to save time. So it's things like the research activities that our analysts are doing and keeping this information up to date. So some folks will say, oh, well, we'll go out into CXO magazine, and sure, that would give you some high-level idea or understanding of where maybe industry is heading, but this is what our analysts do for a living. These are Gartner employees. They're not 1099s. Their sole job is to write research, to speak with our clients, and to speak at our events. As far as saving money, or in the case of the government, a lot of times it's around cost avoidance, the idea that we'll review contracts to see, and we have a really robust set of benchmarks around pricing. So for instance, Microsoft would be an area where we look at close to 1,000 Microsoft contracts per year, and we know what good pricing and terms and conditions look like. And that's information that we can share with our clients to help them in the negotiations. And that's just an example of one vendor. As far as gaining insight, this idea that these analysts are an extension of your team, so without having to hire them directly, the access to their insights to be there is invaluable, and use them as a sounding board for what you're working on. And a lot of times it is about gaining confidence. You might think, and a lot of our clients do, that they're down the right path, but they're not exactly sure. Reading the research, speaking to an analyst, or as I'll tell some of my clients who 4 years ago that were espousing the virtues of cloud, and they were in a risk-averse organization that was pushing back, I said, well, in the future, use Gartner as the bad guy, if you will, to say, well, I was reading the Gartner research. I spoke to a Gartner analyst. This is what they're saying. So it's not putting your personal brand on the line, but saying that this is what the world's largest IT advisory services company is saying, that where the industry is heading, and then start the conversation from there. So as far as any questions here, I'll wrap up. Obviously, as I mentioned, you can reach out to George or myself if you have any questions. And as I said, my role is to make sure that those that have access to Gartner are getting value from it. They're not just using it, but getting actionable insights. And for those that don't have access, helping them to build the business case as to why it would be a worthwhile investment of their time and money. So with that.
Okay, so as Mark said, just to reemphasize, this is more for the feds. We do have 40 licenses that OIT is sponsoring, and they distribute it across CMS. And the good thing is that we see the value, we use the research. You'll see that in our strategies, in our direction, in our guidance. If nothing else, it validates what we're thinking, and it gives us other thoughts as well. It's a good sounding board for us. So I encourage all the feds, that you want to in the industry. You guys are there already. Unfortunately, this offering cannot be extended to you, but with the feds, that's one of my aims and goals. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you, George.
Just wrapping up in here, just one last thing. So next month, it will be May 31st, and it's going to be about AWS, about the architectural framework that we've set up there, and also about the services available. And there's some confusion about some of the services, so that would be a good opportunity to sort of let you know what we have in the approach that we're taking on those FedRAMP and non-FedRAMP services that are available. So I think we have a good approach, and that will be valuable for all of you to understand what that is. And hopefully we can bring some clarity in terms of the usage of those services. Any questions in general? I know we have about 26 minutes. No? Yes, one question.
This was related to the earlier presentation.
Uh-huh.
So I was just thinking, when you were trying to access it within the silos, typically there's a DUA process, and there's system access and DUA process, where each business owner decides who gets access to the data. Now, in this master data management approach, the business owners still have oversight and participation in terms of who gets to look at that data. And once you're making the mashups and representing that information, do they still have to review how you represent that data to all of the users?
Maybe you can rephrase the question for those on the phone.
So for those who might be on the phone, there were 2 pieces for our MDM question. Part of it was about DUAs and whether a business has a say or what the say is, and getting the access to that data, and then also whether there's oversight on the way that the data gets represented. So let me take the second part first. So the representation is, a lot of it is around, we have transparency back to whatever the source system was, but we also do what I call the, we conform to ELDM. So a lot of times that is a part of what people have to look at. They have to look at maybe what the source systems, how the way they identified the data, plus the fact that we've done this. It's not so much the mashup so much as the conformance to it. But part of your question might have been, when you use the term mashup, it's the fact that you've consolidated data across different areas. So we're just being a system of reference to that data. So we work with the systems of record to make sure that we're accurately bringing in their data and reflecting their data as it is. But the mashup part, that really comes down to the value that the consumer might receive by looking at that data consolidated across multiple areas. So they really don't have a say as far as, well, don't show our data against matched up with some other set of data. That would be contrary to the idea of the visibility and the transparency that we're trying to present. The DUA piece is that, so if a contract would need to have access or a system would need to have access, we really make sure that the person's access is for whatever that source system is. They need to make sure that they have that. So we as a system, the only thing that we really add is a data element per se, is we add an enterprise ID. So that's the only thing that is from us as a system of record. We do actually have a authority to operate and everything else. So there is data. The only piece that we own is that index that does the matching against it. Everything else, the person or the system or the contractor would have to have their DUA or their rights and security ability to see what the source system data was. So, and we facilitate that with what the source systems are if somebody's coming just to us and they've never worked with these other source systems. So we do facilitate that. Hopefully that answers it.
Any other question? No? Oh, sorry. We have a concept today to provide an offering within OIT to working with all the different components that have data, such as CMCS from a TMCS perspective, CPI from the PECOS perspective, and so forth. And the idea is working with those teams and be inclusive of this work group of data architects, if you will, to sort of come up with practices and guidance to teams that are trying to use the source data, MDM being one of them, IDR being another source, and so forth. But the goal is to create a more tangible on the specific aspects of each project, because each project is very situational when they're looking for data to use, and it's not just a matter of saying, okay, go to MDM and get this. Sometimes it takes a consultation, and then having people that know all the data resources that we have and some of the ties behind the data and bring that information forth in a meaningful way to those teams so they can make those informed decisions. And that's what we're trying to sort of cover up from a gap perspective. But at the same time, push certain elements of the data architecture that allows that data that is being used for those project teams in a way that it can be leveraged across CMS and create actually data products. That's our vision, and having APIs against those data products that can be real. This is one element of, and I know this is kind of like a registry for services, but this would be one aspect of it. As part of our DevOps efforts, we're trying to create, there's other efforts as well to create that sort of, I would say, quote unquote, registry of services as well. And that's one area that CMS has always tackled for as many years as I can remember, and it's been hard because you got to get the management, the staff, how do you create all the governance around those services. But we're trying to take it now in a different manner, and that approach is maybe we just concentrate on the data products. DevOps is more about the different architectural aspect of things, and try to divvy up instead of taking the whole thing at once. But you hear more and more of that. But that's the basic concept. Any other questions? Okay, so if you want to hear more of the details of these things, you got to keep coming to Tech Topics. All right, I'll see you next month. Thanks.